dialed Arxos. Is that how you say it? Arxos? Well, I know a lot of people have probably been wondering why it has taken so long to review the dialed Arxos sight. The truth to that is, honestly, I haven't gotten around to it. A couple weeks ago, I actually just bought one for myself, and I was like, you know what, I just want to learn this sight, figure it out, and then we worked with Lancaster Archery Supply to do a Lancaster Archery unboxing to get one start to finish. So this dialed Arxos sight is definitely a high dollar sight. At least the price tag says that it is a high dollar sight. It's $500, which I think is the most expensive archery sight on the market in the hunting category, at least for like a single pin slider like this. And I think the most eye-grabbing thing of the dialed sight is just the overall look and the aesthetics. I know the guys behind this are super creative guys. They've been in the industry a long time, so they've definitely put their taste on making it look sexy and clean, which they definitely did. So right off the bat, this sight comes in the dovetail style. It also comes in a Picatinny rail if you shoot one of the newer Hoyts and want to run a Picatinny, but it's either Picatinny or this. There's not a bolt-on version that screws right into the riser. It does come with one of these if you don't have a newer Matthews or a newer Hoyt that has a Picatinny, so you can just put it on the side of the bow like normal, but it doesn't have the actual option like this, like some of the Spot Hogs and HHA, to have a mount that goes right into the bow. One of the most unique things about this sight is obviously this giant slant in the bar that adjusts up and down. So as you move it up and down, it runs on an angle, which has never been done before. And they claim, which is true, they claim that you gain a little bit of yardage the farther you go, because the closer your sight comes to the riser, the longer the distance you can get, because it's not as far away from your peep sight, it's closer to your bow, you get a little bit more yardage. How much, I'm not quite sure what this angle is gonna do. It might do a yard or two at some longer distances. So I'd be kind of interested to try that out. The next most different thing about this sight is the actual dial wheel. One, it's see-through, which is kind of dope, and it definitely looks cool, but I forget what they call it, but it's, you can switch the sight tape from either one side or the other side of the sight. So depending on how you're looking at it, if you want it on the inside and turn the bow like this to look at it, you can have it there, or if you like it on the outside, you can pop it on the outside and adjust it from the outside. Now I will note, I tried to do this a little bit earlier, and it was very confusing and quite a bit of work to do. So I ended up not even messing around with it because I didn't want to mess it up, because at the time I only had this one, and I was like, I'm not gonna break this thing to try to do it. So definitely a little bit complex on how to take that apart. I actually couldn't get this inner bushing ring to pop out. I don't know if I just didn't want to break it or what, or had the wrong hex tool key thing to twist it out, but I couldn't even get that out. So similar to HHA, where this is a HHA sight tape ring, you can swap this dial one out, in and out, just by one little simple set screw. So you can take the sight tape off, you can put a new one on, you can replace them by just holding them. So I actually really like that. I really like that on my HHAs. I think, yes, they do send another one, so you have another one right here that you can just swap in and out of that. I really love that feature in the dialed and in the HHAs. Another cool feature is they have this light dimmer up on top. Now this has been in other sights. I know Excel has had this several times, where the whole housing actually twists like this. So a cool little feature that if you're in like full sun and you want it a little bit dimmer, you can actually do that pretty dang easily. It is a little loosey-goosey in here. I'm a little nervous that if you shoot in the vibrations, if it'll kind of move on you, but I haven't really noticed that yet. But just touching it It's just really easy to move. Probably fix that by just maybe putting something in there to make it a little bit more friction fit. Left and right adjustment. It's actually really good. The clicks are super crisp. You can feel them. There's no worries about like, did I actually click it? You can count the clicks and everything. Very impressed with the clicks on this. And you have these little lines that you can very quickly reference and indicate if you have to make any big changes or anything. So that's a good little touch. You got them on both sides. The bubble is on top of the scope. This definitely is a little bit different than your typical scopes. I know some scope manufacturers have done this in the past, but it just gives you a different viewpoint, which I don't really hate. Like, there's really anywhere in the scope that it lies, because your peep sight centers around it. Anywhere it lies and you can just reference it really quick is fine. So it's kind of cool, kind of different that they put the bubble up at the top. Their pins, this is the double pin version and this is the triple pin version. So it offers it in a 3-pin like this, which I believe is all 19 thousandths. I think you can select which thousandths you want. And then this one is the double pin. And this one looks more like a 19th and then a 10 thousandths at the bottom. I believe you can customize that a little bit. Your second axis adjustment is right here in the front. So similar to other sights, it's just the part that mounts on the rail. You can loosen this one and the bottom one, and you can actually slide this up and down for your initial sight in. You want to make sure that it's, you can get maximum distance out of your sight, any sight, so you can quickly adjust that. And then the bottom one, I believe it's the bottom one. Yeah, the bottom one, an oval down there. So you can take it and actually rock it. The top one is obviously a perfect circle and the bottom's an oval, so you can rock it back and forth. That'll get you your second axis adjustment. So shooting on flat ground, it'll get your bubble lined up correctly. Your third axis. Third axis is just this simple little bolt right here. And I believe in order to micro adjust this, you loosen it and then you uncover this little hidden set screw by twisting your windage all the way to the left. So you can then, I believe, you can then use the set screw on this side and the set screw. It's not even a set screw, it's more of an adjustment screw, but there's 2 screws on opposite sides and you kind of wiggle them back and forth. And you gotta make sure that they're both seated down at the end of it. So that's kind of cool that it's micro adjustment. It is kind of a pain that you have to rip the windage all the way to the left in order to do that, because if you're sighted in, you wanna recheck your third axis, then you gotta get unsighted in and then get resighted in. That's a little annoying. So the dialed sight definitely has been a little bit of a craze. There's a lot of marketing behind it right now. It's some cool dudes in the industry that all team together to come out with a pretty cool sight that has not really any new tech other than this slant in the bar. That's kind of new. I've never seen anyone do that. But everything else has kind of been done before, but they all put it in a super neat package. It's a cool brand behind it. So kudos to those guys. I've been watching, following along. Now with that said, there are several things, and why I'm not shooting this sight full time, there are several things that are kind of deal breakers for me. So I think the first thing that kind of just makes me uneasy is if I'm out hunting in the woods and let's say we're spot and stalk, elk hunting, whatever, and I set my sight to, let's say 20 yards. And then I'm walking and all of a sudden I bump a tree or something. This sight doesn't necessarily have a lock on it, so you can very easily push the whole bar up and down without knowing, essentially. So that kind of, it's not the end of the world. It seems like it stays in place when you're shooting. Like if you're shooting 50 yards over and over and over again, I don't think it's gonna move on you. What I do prefer, like this HHA, it does move also, and a landslide moves also. It's definitely harder to move the landslide out of all of them. With this HHA, you have this quick little lock, and then your sight's not going anywhere. On the dialed, they do have this little pin. They do have this little pin right here, but it doesn't quite lock it down. It just increases the friction on it. So you can unlock it and it's more loose, and then you lock it and it's a little bit tighter, but it still doesn't quite 100% lock it down. Something else that personally is a pet peeve of mine, I think out of all of the brands, the landslide does it the best, is the indicator pins. So these indicator pins stand out a good bit from the sight tape. There's a pretty good gap. 1.5 millimeters it stands out from the sight tape. Now, this isn't like a huge problem, but shooting at a little bit further distances, if you're looking at your sight either from the top or the bottom slightly, you can about have a 2-yard difference of your indicator to your sight tape just because there's a little gap there. Spot hogs are kind of probably honestly the worst. Their indicators are super fat, far away from the sight tape. So there's the most room for error once you're setting your sight tape. And I think Landslide does it the best. You can swap out glass indicator with this little micro, like little needle head, which sits really tight to the sight tape. It's very precise. It's a little bit tough to see, but I've gotten used to it, and it's precise. And that's the most important thing, especially at the longer distances. As close to the sight tape as you can get, and the pointier you can get, the more precise you can get at your sight tape marks. Another thing that kind of is just more of a comfort first world problem deal is I love their oversized dial. You can hang on to it really nice. The knurling on it is really aggressive, so you got good grip if you're wearing gloves or anything. The only problem, I don't know if it's because I have bigger hands, but it's because if I grab onto it like I normally would, my knuckle slams into this windage bar. The windage bar is pretty tight on the dial here. So if I was all the way up at 20 and I'm like, oh, I gotta shoot at 70 quick, boom, my knuckle kind of rams into that. So even though you can do a full spin on this dial, I get jammed up right there and I gotta end up doing 2 rotations on it. Compared to some other ones, like there's a lot of room on that dial for your knuckles. The Landslide, there's not also a lot of room on that, and you get hit up on this windage right here. So having full rotation on a knob, I really like, especially for quick movements. If you gotta, if you're elk hunting or mule deer hunting or anything, and you gotta swing from 20 to 50 yards really quick in one motion. And I don't like it that you get jammed up a little bit there by your knuckle. Other than that, which is just like a few personal, again, my opinion, personal preference, what I look at in a sight, because I like to try stuff, I like to shoot everything and land on something because of actually, my own functionality and why I personally like it. So just a couple little things. They're not necessarily deal breakers. Like, this still is a great sight, great performing sight. It looks really sexy and clean. Couple things that there's better options that suit my needs than these couple little things. And overall, you can tell it's a startup company that's still working out a couple kinks. And I know that part of the reason why I waited is because when they came out at first, I know that people were talking about a lot of issues, a couple little quality control things here and there. And I waited, and now it seems like they cleaned it up a little bit, but you can still kind of tell some of their manufacturing things. You can hear there's a little bit of slop in the dial. I don't know if it's just this one. It is just that one, because this one's not like that. So just a couple little quality control things that, again, like a startup company like they are, that's just kind of normal kinks that you work through. So I get it. I 100% get it. I just don't think it's fully baked yet. A lot of the concepts are dope. It's a sweet company. And I think with some time, this thing can be really sweet. Okay. We got the dialed sight on. What I always like to do is get sighted inside at 8 yards first so that I don't have a horrendous miss outside, which will be good because I have a feeling that I am going to adjust this bar to get maximum height so that I can run it all the way up, and then we'll adjust this up or down as needed. But I know I'm gonna have to be right there, roughly. Yeah. So we're gonna run this all the way up, and then we can slide, oh wow, slide this down probably to right there. My 20 yard is always roughly where the scope is directly in line with this bar, so I can roughly get it there. Then after we do this, we'll get our second axis. So I'm just gonna hand loosely tighten that. Nice. Or actually, it's a little right. So that was actually pretty solid. So this is my like 8-10 yard mark is still kind of like my 20ish yard mark. So what I'm going to do now is we have maximum range because it's mounted to the rail at the lowest point. So when I go to rack it all the way down, the scope's as low as it possibly can go. So any sight, you always want to do that. You know, that can get you 100 yards, should get you 100 yards. If you ended up just leaving it in the middle, when you go to roll it down, it's going to hit the stop and you're going to end up at like 80. I always like to run it like that, as far down on the rail as possible. We're going to take this off, put it in the jig, get our second and third axis good, and then we'll get our 20 yard mark. Okay, thankfully I don't gotta do that. All right, it's like 25 degrees out today, or 20 yards. I'm gonna get a mark. Tell you what, with this bright contrast, that was hard to see the fiber, but I swapped over our little slider thing to be more bright, so we'll see how it is. It's better. And I ran adjustment all the way to the right, so now I got to loosen those two bolts, move it over again. Okay. Second axis is back good. When you move the barrel over, it messes up your second axis stuff. Okay, let's try it again. Bada bing, bada boom. Alright, that looks good. We got our 20 mark, so they have a setup tape that we are going to put at, I assume, right there for 20. Be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, yeah. So we're going to tighten this down. Okay, so that's tightened down at 0. That's our 20 mark. Now Dialed has sent like setup tape, like your obviously setup tape, and then a bunch of marks. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go sight in at 60 yards, and then whatever number that it lands on is what sight tape you have. I just realized I put it on this little paint mark instead of one of the pins, but I think it's still fine. Honestly, I might run off of this paint mark for right now. We'll just give that a go. Okay, I'm guessing where my 60 is right now, so hopefully I'm semi-close. Okay, semi-close. Not bad. That's good. We'll do our last one. I will say, out in the light, it does look pretty sick, and it's almost perfectly matched with my granite out in the light. It is slightly different. It's like almost just the dial is just a touch darker, but it looks really good. We'll call that good enough for a rough sight tape mark. Okay, so the instructions on doing this is: begin sighting in using the test tape that is installed on the switch tape on your sight. Find your 20-yard mark, which we did, and then continue to shoot as far as you are comfortable. we're just gonna call it 60 because 60 is always where I get my sight tapes. Mark the found distance on this card, which there's like a tape on this card, to the right with a pen or pencil. The further you shoot, the more accurate your tape will be. Drag this card with marks across the sight tape booklet and match the 20-yard mark and the furthest mark on this card as closely as possible to find the final sight tape. Move the Arxos to 20 yards and remove the switch tape ring with the test tape. Select your sight tape from the booklet and place on the included blank switch tape ring. Then attach to the sight, matching the 20-yard mark to the indicator. Quite a lot going on there, lots of tapes. So essentially, how sight tapes work is you either have like a HHA one, you have a landslide one, and Excel and landslides. I use this little gauge. You can also use a very highly precise gauge, which is what I prefer because what we're dealing with is very, very precise marks, and a little tiny bit matters a whole lot at 100 yards. And what I don't like is that this is how they're precisely doing it, is essentially a business card, and you have to wrap it around this, mark it on here because it's rounded, and since the dial is rounded, you got to measure it rounded because when you flatten it out, you know, it obviously flattens out. So a little cumbersome on this. I like how the HHAs you just select what, you know, sight tape it's labeled and then you punch it in, which this is at 22, but the way that they describe this, I don't think I'm gonna land on 22 unless this is correct, which we're gonna try it. Yeah, that's not. It doesn't go off of the basis of the numbers. These numbers don't mean anything with correlation to the tape. So you do have to do what they are recommending. You can visually wrap it around and mark it, or you can just see that this lands on 22. So we're gonna mark 22 right here for our 60, and then we're marking this mark for our 20. So now we go here. Where are we at here? We're way over here. 20. Oh, wow, we're way down on the list. We got a fast bow. Dang, really? We're using sight tape number 1. Oh, no, we're not. No, we're not. I was doing that wrong. And honestly, it's so tough to tell because you can't line up the lines exactly. So I'm gonna modify this so that I can actually line up the lines correctly. So we got top and then 22 just there. I'm almost in between. Wait, where is the 20? Is that 20 or is this 20? That's 20, isn't it? That top line? That's not 20. This is 20, right? 20, then that's 30, and that's 40. Okay. I was confused there for a second. So 20, 22 right there. All right, I think that's our winner. Sight tape number 10. So we have sight tape number 10. And we are going to use the extra dial that they sent us. And we are going to just lay it on here. This part I really like, how you can just grab a hold of this and make sure it's nice and neat on there. A lot of extra tape on the bottom if you wanted to mark out further distances. I like that. Okay, so we're gonna move our sight back to 20 yards. And we can't lock it into place. I can press in the tensioner to make sure it doesn't move. You just gotta be careful that you don't bump it all during this process or you're gonna jank everything up. So now, and put our actual sight tape on and get it lined up at 20. So we're just gonna line it up right there at 20. And I'm just gonna use this little paint line instead of the pins. I kinda like the paint line a little bit better. We're gonna tighten it down. Boom. And there we go. We got a sight tape on and we're ready to shoot. And we can get a ton of distance out of this. I don't know how much clearance we're gonna have, but we at least set us up for success here. So we can go well beyond. If we just grab this Frankenstein arrow, because we were testing out our new archery wraps, we can get, geez, probably It's not tightened down, don't worry. Probably 115 maybe, if that's right, because that's our, so that's about the max I would want to go. So yeah, we can get a lot of distance here. So that might be in part because of the slant of the bar. I think I can typically get about 110, 115 on my setups. So I think this is going to conclude the video. A LancasterArcherySupply.com unboxing and review of the dialed Arxos sight. Definitely a super cool sight, very clean, innovative. But I think with a couple more revisions, this thing could be even more sick than it is right now. So definitely going to tinker with it more. If you want to check it out, make sure to check it out on LancasterArcherySupply.com. You can get one literally tomorrow if you're that impatient by ordering it on LancasterArcherySupply.com. Thank you all for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.